Welcome to Tech Startup Stories, hosted by Natalie Binns. This is the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the B2B startup world.
Hi, I'm Natalie Binns, and after many years as a marketing leader in the B2B SaaS industry, I set up Hey Gabby to support startups and scale-ups with their go-to-market and growth needs. I work with so many great founders, and that's led me to want to hear their stories and share them with others. And that's why I set up this podcast. So let's get into this week's podcast. Hi, everyone. This week, I'm speaking with Elena Boos, and she is the CEO and founder of Visionary Farms. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I am really interested in what you're building. I had a look on your website. It looks really interesting, but I'd love to hear from you. Tell me about what the company is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Visionary Farms, we've got tech that grows plants anywhere, even in the darkest spaces. And we're using it to bring nature indoors and reconnect the indoors with nature. So we're working mostly with workspaces right now to create tech-enabled indoor plantings that are used to grow community well-being and bring more biophilic design into spaces, because plants are really, really good for us. We're the average office worker spending over 90% of their time indoors, and this takes a massive toll on their mental health and well-being. So there was recently a Danish study that showed that people with low access to nature were at a 55% higher risk of developing psychiatric disorders, which is a really, really scary stat. Yeah, 55% higher risk. And so we have to spend our time indoors because we've got Zoom calls and podcast recordings and meetings to be in. But that doesn't mean that we should expose ourselves to that big risk. And so that's what we do. We bring plants into typically dark spaces in large footprint buildings where you don't have a lot of natural light, and we help them thrive there. But also we use varieties that are not just kind of decorative and just a piece of decor simply for aesthetics, but we also work with buildings to create interactive plantings that can be used in community engagement initiatives.
Wow. How did you get into that? Because that just seems like such a different service or product to anything that we've had on this podcast, certainly.
Yeah, it is quite niche and unique, definitely. So my background is in vertical farming technology. So in the past, I helped build and scale a vertical farming tech company. We've developed hardware and software for large scale commercial growing. And then we used it to deliver turnkey vertical farming projects for our customers. So those were kind of large infrastructure projects. Our largest was 1,400 square meters. And that was really great, and it felt impactful because we were growing crops for retail that then people were buying and eating. And I think to date our projects have produced about 4,000 tons of leafy greens and strawberries, which is an amazing impact to make. But as we were doing those large infrastructure projects, we also used that smart vertical farming tech to create indoor gardens in workplaces, in schools. We worked with 7 schools, including a special educational needs school, with universities. And those were some of my favorite projects because they were really creative. It was amazing to see the impact on the space of the tech and the plants, but also the impact that it had on the people within it. But they were also the most challenging projects because the barriers to entry were very high in terms of the cost, the installation requirements, the maintenance requirements that often come with these systems, and especially with hydroponics. And so what I wanted to do is take a bite-sized piece of that tech that's super easy to understand, install, integrate, and then maintain, but that would also produce that same impact that those vertical farming gardens made. And so what we've done is we've created a smart grow lighting system that creates the perfect light conditions for plants indoors. And lighting is the biggest issue when growing indoors, or lack of it. We do it in a very energy efficient way. And then we also track the microclimate around the plants to make sure that things like HVAC systems or drafts from open doors aren't making them unwell. And then we also have a software system that creates a digital twin of the planting, helps track the health of the planting, and then also helps automatically create those perfect conditions that they need. Um, and so we're working with workspaces right now, but of course there's a lot of applications for our tech in apartment living, kind of built to rent developments, in retirement living, which I'm really excited and passionate about, as well as education.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. And in terms of setting up the business, you were working with a startup before. So going it alone, building the business yourself, how did you do that? Where did you start?
So I joined the last company I was working with as a founder's associate. It was a sole founder, and I was basically the first employee. So together we built the tech team and built the tech. And I managed a lot of the sales kind of tasks. We were bootstrapping, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to fundraising at the time. So setting up with Visionary Farms, I already had a really good foundation to build upon. It didn't feel like my first rodeo exactly. The fundraising and the pitching for investment was a new experience that you really just have to get used to through practice. But key was building the right team and putting the right people together to create the vision and create the company. And I think that's what we've done now.
So did you get funding straight away?
With Visionary Farms, yes, because we're a connected hardware company, we needed to do things like prototyping as well as software development. So I did need funding, and I raised a friends and family round in May last year, 2024, and that helped us develop the tech, apply for patent applications and create prototypes, eventually getting us to client ready or market ready hardware and software at the start of this year, which we then started commercializing.
Right, excellent. So that's been quite the journey. So what's your typical day look like?
I'm sure every single founder will say that it's very, very varied. And no day is the same. I do like getting out of the house. So I think when you're working on a startup and you're working from home a lot of the time, it can feel like you just need to be there in focus mode, banging out emails nonstop and hopping on Zoom calls. But I find it really helps to go to events, and often if they're interesting events, you end up meeting interesting people that can help you advance in business, and even just getting out and kind of getting into focus mode, but in a space like a co-working space, which is useful for me because we work with co-working spaces, so it's almost like the true sales as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great opportunity to prospect if you're there. So in terms of building the technology itself, how have you built that? Have you worked with an agency, a company, or have you worked with individuals to help you?
Yeah, so we worked completely with individuals. We've got a brilliant software team that is who works with us. They're all kind of independent contractors, but eventually, once budgets allow, they're so amazing that I would definitely want to bring them in full time. And they are the ones who built the system to get under my I want to say leadership and management. And then we also have contractors who built the or designed the electronics and the hardware, which we then manufactured or prototyped with a partner, OEM partner in Malaysia. So it's kind of a lot of moving parts. And we still have a lot of moving parts because we're planning to set up our own assembly line in the UK to be a more sustainable supplier for those off spaces. Um, but yeah, it's very interesting experience building hardware and software because you kind of get the issues that come with both. So I can completely understand why a lot of people don't love hardware and don't like to invest or engage with it. But it's definitely having something physical. has always been very important for me. I don't think that I could ever do a purely software business. Um, just the way that I am, very tactile and need to have a physical thing.
So, what about your personal view on plants and growth? Is that something that you do in your spare time? Are you a big gardener?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always liked plants, and in fact, the reason why I got into vertical farming in the first place was because it kind of encapsulated my interest, which was tech, and then nature and plants, and then also food. Um, I think that we are very disconnected from nature in our daily lives. So I think about, my business is based in Birmingham, so I think about my typical day in Birmingham. It will be walking around kind of a concrete jungle. It will be sitting on my laptop or my phone, maybe going for food like at a Pret, which is just very standard, not very green, and then driving back home in a car that's also not very green. And so I think that we could all do with a bit more nature. And of course, now when you go into office spaces, there are often beautiful plantings there. But with time, your brain kind of stops noticing them, just like you stop noticing a piece of art or a sculpture, because they're very static. They're not changing. They're always the same, and in every office, they look very similar as well. And so, what I want to do is create something that's with tech, create something that evolves a bit more, and that's a bit more engaging in terms of both visually, because it's changing throughout the seasons. Maybe it's using varieties that are flowering every so often. Um, but also it's engaging in a way that you can interact with it. If you had in the workplace a little space, an indoor garden where you can go in and you can, I don't know, harvest some mint for your tea at lunchtime. Already that's a brilliant connection to nature that helps you ground yourself even during a very stressful day.
I can really see how that would play out, especially for a large office environment. So let's go back to building out the technology. What were the biggest challenges in the early days for you? I know that you've done all this before with a previous organization. What was different, kind of building your own company?
Um, I'm a sole founder, and I don't have although I do have a science background and I have experience working in tech, I wouldn't say that I'm a technical founder. Maybe I am now, kind of by osmosis. Um, but so that was the hard part. And actually, I didn't start out as a sole founder. I did have a technical co-founder, and once we raised our funding and we started the development process, he decided that startup life wasn't really for him, and he kind of went off to other pastures. Um, and that was a very stressful time for me because I wasn't sure what to do. Do I give the money back now and kind of look for something else and someone else? And ultimately, I decided to persevere and kind of just try to do it myself with the people that I trusted, with like the software developers and the hardware engineers. And obviously we succeeded in record time as well, because in less than a year we had client ready hardware and software that we were starting to install with customers. But that was probably the biggest challenge, having the self-belief that I could do it without that technical co-founder there.
That must have been quite a journey to go on and quite a risk to keep going, but obviously it's paying off. So with COVID and the whole, we're working from home and now there's a lot of people being kind of dragged back to the office. Some people are happily, gainfully skipping back to the office, others not so much. How are you attacking, or how are you going after your target audience? What's your go-to-market strategy?
Sure. So far we've been working mostly direct with tenants. So with a typical mid-sized corporate coming to them and saying, "Get us a New York space. We're the next big thing." And that's great for getting those first early case studies done. Um, but it's very resource time intensive. Really, it takes a lot of effort. And it's not very efficient. So now we are, and that was always the plan, that we would get those first case studies, and then we would switch the strategy to partner sales. So we are targeting partners who already work in the workspace space. Maybe they work in plants, maybe they work in design and build, so designing the space, or maybe they're a furniture manufacturer. But they could be our one-to-many partners that could help us get into lots of buildings quickly. And actually, it's a very exciting time for us because we have an executive chair joining Visionary Farms in the next week. Our first board meeting is in a week. And his name is Tom, and he spent years building an indoor landscaping company that he then scaled across the UK and recently exited. So that experience will help us so much in building out those partnerships and mean that we become purely a tech company that supplies standardized hardware and software to office refurbs or new office building projects.
Got it. And who in the organization is your typical go-to? Is it the facilities teams or is it the HR department? Where does it really sit?
So we have a couple target people, which actually works well because that means we come across different budgets. So facilities managers, definitely people who are working to make the space pleasant and to make the visitor and employee experience pleasant, are definitely people we are targeting. But then in some very forward-thinking organizations, you also have people like sustainability director or ESG director. And then in some you even have well-being managers or well-being experts. And those are people that we're speaking to as well. That's definitely they get excited about the idea of tech. They get excited about the well-being benefits that plants can bring, and then also the well-being benefits that interacting with plants can bring, and the new well-being initiatives and community building initiatives that they can develop with our tech. So as an example, one of our customers is X and Y. We're a co-working space provider, green co-working space provider with 17 locations across the UK. And they are using our tech to create a community allotment right in their co-working space, which is really key for them because it helps engage the community and reduce churn. People set down roots, they meet new friends, they're part of a club, they don't want to move on to another space.
I love it. Setting down roots. We're just going to tally up all of the buzzwords at the end of the podcast. I love it.
Yeah.
So tell me, you originally set up the prototype in Malaysia, and often, that makes sense to find somewhere that can build it very easily. There's very little cost associated with building a foundational team. But you talked earlier about bringing and building a team in the UK. And we know UK manufacturing has been on the decline for many, many years. What's been your thought process around that? And what do you think are going to be the big challenges in getting that going?
Yeah, well, we're bringing British manufacturing back and making it great again, I guess, on a very, very small scale to start with. So you're right. We built our first prototypes in Malaysia. We have a great manufacturing partner there that's worked with Bosch, Hyundai, Nissan, so their quality control is excellent. They know a lot about lighting, so that's what attracted us to them. And they will continue manufacturing our electronic components, so things like control and LED PCBs, because that's what they're good at. And unfortunately, here in the UK, I've not really come across any PCB manufacturers in kind of electronics assembly manufacturers, and those that are in Europe, in countries like Estonia and Poland, are really a lot more expensive than Malaysia. And typically, even there, the components are coming from China, Taiwan anyway. So that those transport emissions are still there. What we do is we 3D print every single one of our units, the housing for our unit. Which means that there isn't a lot of plastic waste when it comes to creating our grow lighting product. So our plan is to have the electronics manufactured in Malaysia, but then brought to the UK, where we'll be 3D printing and then assembling every single unit to order. And that makes us quite a strong supplier because one, it helps us be sustainable, but two, and this is very key, it helps us be flexible, especially in terms of aesthetics. So we are working a lot with designers, with architects, and they're very creative people. And as soon as we say to them, the product looks like this now, but actually you can guide what it will look like for your project, then it becomes a really interesting proposition for them. So that's what we're planning to do. And probably the only biggest challenge there, because the process is relatively simple, but the biggest challenge is keeping hold of all of the moving parts with electronics coming from Malaysia, us needing to 3D print to order, and especially with the small team that we've got. And then also keeping the costs down. So I'd say right now our solution is probably on the premium end when you look at the price for lighting for office spaces, and I think it deserves to be there simply because of the benefits that it offers. But we would like to make it more accessible for loads of different office spaces, not just the top end grade A office spaces. And that's what we'll be working on in the future.
Great. So you mentioned earlier that at the beginning of your journey, you were planning on building the technology and then the start of this year, kind of launching to customers. What was your plan for 2025 and how are you doing against that plan so far?
So when we started commercializing in 2025, we had certain assumptions about things like length of sales cycle. And of course, those assumptions are always very, very optimistic. But I think a lot of founders are very optimistic people. I'd say my team also tends to be very optimistic and kind of excited about risk and things like that, simply because that's who's attracted to startups. So I think we all always start thinking about things in a very positive way, which means that when we start setting our KPIs and objectives, especially when you are just starting out and you don't have a lot of data, historical data to lean on, your projections can be very unrealistic to start. So I'd say the past 6 months we have been grounding ourselves and our plan, and now I think we're starting to be a lot more grounded and realistic in our projections. And help surrounding ourselves with people like our new executive chair Tom, who has experience in this space, has been really key to making that happen. So yeah, keeping morale when you are overly ambitious at times, and maybe the sales cycle is a lot longer than you assume, can be tricky.
I understand. And you hired people from quite early on. Talk me through how you found the right people for the company.
I didn't necessarily hire people as in I was paying them money, because it was very important for me to keep the burn low, because I wanted to develop the tech with the friends and family round that I've managed to get. And tech development is that's an expensive process. So for people who are working in the business, like in marketing, I've got a brilliant relationships director that's on the board now. They're all shareholders through Sweatstack. And I'm not, some founders are, and quite rightly, are quite precious about their equity and kind of how much they'll be giving away. With Visionary Farms, I think we'll be doing more of a seed strapping strategy, in the sense that we're not going to be raising massive series A, B, and C, and D. And so I'm not too precious about diluting myself. And it was always very important for me to get the right people in the business. So equity was the mechanism that I used to do that. And really, I have to say that I found people through my network. I take recommendations very seriously, especially when it's from people that I really respect. And so that's how everybody has come into the company so far, which is not very inclusive. And obviously, as we grow and our budgets get bigger, we'll be looking to change that. But at the very, very start, that's the only tool that was accessible to me at that point.
It makes sense. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you. Starting out a business, it makes sense to go to your network first, tried and trusted, people you know what they can deliver. There's less time onboarding, there's less time getting them up to speed with your communication style, how you work. So it absolutely makes sense. So as we reach our audience out there, and we have a bunch of people that listen to this show that are thinking about taking that step forward, what advice would you give new founders or people that are planning to build their own tech business? What would you share with them?
So my favorite piece of advice ever, and I think that this is, the smartest thing I have ever thought, is don't be afraid to be shameless and be annoying. I think especially as a woman, yeah, just be annoying. Especially as a woman, we are, we're always very polite and nice and friendly, and we don't want to bother. At least that's a place where I find myself at often. And kind of a long time ago, I decided that I'm just going to be completely shameless. And of course, I still feel shame. But I lock it away, and I feel it later, kind of late at night when I should be sleeping, as everybody else does. And that makes me very bold and brave. And I think to build a startup and to pioneer a new concept that a lot of people will constantly tell you is not going to work, you have to be big and bold and brave. And shame is a limiting factor. So as an example, we got our first customer because I emailed him every single week for 4 months, which is really crazy behavior, obviously. But eventually he finally said, okay, fine, I'll meet you for a coffee. Within 10 minutes of meeting, he was apologizing to me for being so rude to me. And actually, he was really interested, and he bought right there on that meeting. Uh, Yes, I know. So if there's ever an argument for just going at it and not being afraid to be annoying, it's definitely that. It also means that you are very memorable, for better or for worse, and usually it's for better, and people will keep coming back to you once you have established that relationship.
I love it. I'm not sure you're annoying, but I definitely think you're bold and confident, and I think that's fantastic. We've not had that many women on the show yet, something that I'm trying to fix for season 2, which I'm proud that you're part of, and bringing in that strength. Do you feel a sense of responsibility to other women out there, given that there are so few women in the B2B tech space as founders?
I think I'd feel responsibility, or to be honest, yes, probably, because I never thought I would ever be a first woman to do anything. I thought all the paths have been trodden at this point. But recently, I went to pitch to an angel syndicate that's very much kind of an old boys club, and I got told that I was the first woman to be pitching to them, and that was a real shock. Yeah, that is a huge responsibility, and also it shouldn't be happening in this day and age. So because I am finding places where I am the first woman to be doing things, I do feel like there's a certain degree. I think also there's not a lot of women in hardware. He said not a lot in B2B tech, not a lot on hardware at all, if any. I've not come across any women in hardware yet. Please tell me where they are, because I want to be friends. So there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of the founding landscape, the entrepreneurship landscape in the UK, at least. I can't speak for other regions, and that's shown with the funding disparity that the female founded startups also face. So I definitely feel responsibility there.
Eleanor, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. I appreciate all of your advice and feedback for our listeners, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
That's it for this episode of Tech Startup Stories. Have a story you'd like us to share, or a topic you'd want to cover? Reach out and we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care.